Hello students, my name is Dr. Shantanu Ganguly. I am the Fellow and Area Convener, Knowledge Management Division of TERI. Today, I am going to talk to you regarding communication in libraries and information centers. As you must be aware that communication is an extremely important component today because you communicate with both internal and external environment. Since we are in the service industry, communication plays an extremely pragmatic role because if you don't communicate, then your information is not going to get disseminated. There are several terminologies available as far as communication is concerned. Currently, one of the most popular communication terminology which is used is called outreach. Means which you are disseminating your information, services, knowledges to a wide range of people. After reading this module, you will understand the importance of the staff communication in libraries. You will know the various forms of communication in an organization. You will differentiate between the internal and the external communication. You would be able to explain the role of formal and informal communications, and you will also list the various forms of staff communications in the libraries. Communication word or the word called communicate comes from a Latin word called communis or common. It indicates that two people or a groups of people have something in common and they want to exchange something, some ideas, some feelings. There are several researchers who have been working in the field of communication. Ojomo in 2004 defined the communication as the process of sharing ideas, feelings, thoughts, and messages with others. Rothwell, 2001, sees communication as a transactional process of sharing meaning with others. Kemoni in 2004, citing to the Ojamo, is of the view that communication involves the giving and receiving of information, signals, or messages by talk, by gestures, by writing. Odini in 1999 identifies that communication as one of the core competencies that all information professionals should possess. Interpersonal communication involves sending and receiving messages between two or more people. Let us look at effective communication. Every individual has his own unique language. Generally speaking, there are as many languages as there are individuals. Because every person uses his or her unique combination of spoken languages, nonverbal communication skills, and styles of augmentation to express his thoughts. Know who you are speaking to. Empathizing with people from different backgrounds and seeing the world through their eyes can allow you to communicate with anyone, anywhere in the world. For an effective communicator, the audience is the first and foremost. One cannot formulate one's argument until one properly understands where the listeners are coming from. Don't coerce or persuade. An embarrassment of riches. Everyone realizes that people communicate by speaking. But it is amazing to consider how much of our feelings and even thoughts we convey by nonverbal communication. Our gestures and facial expressions can tell the listener, or rather watcher, a lot about us. Often the impression of give by our body language and movements can color the message we are trying to express with our spoken words. Be aware. Be aware of every factor in the communication process, about your own strengths and weaknesses, the expectations of your listener, the logic of your arguments, and most importantly, the goal you have in mind for the interaction. If the conversation says, guide it gently back to the central issue at hand and pursue your aims with good communication. Like I'm talking to you today, it's a communication. Without saying anything, I can use my eyes. I can have different kind of gestures. How people communicate when they are hearing impaired? They use different kinds of fingers. They use different kinds of body movements where basically it shows that how a person is communicating. But whether it is a verbal communications or communication or non-verbal communication, communication is an important component. Now, importance of communication. Communication at individual level. You may have to interact with the people, with your organization. These may be your colleagues or co-workers, superiors, subordinates, who may work with you in your own department, in another part of the building or in another branch. And you may also have to deal with the people from outside the organization, like your clients, your suppliers, or visitors and members of the public. Communication at organization level. Information must be communicated to managers so that they will have a basis for planning, as the plans must be communicated to others to be carried out. Let us take an example of communication at individual level. Suppose you have developed a customized information service or a content information service on a very specialized thematic areas. Now you would be communicating to your large number of your clienteles who are within the organization or outside the organization. Now you need to understand how they will perceive this, what you have communicated. Whereas, if you are the librarian of a library information center, how you are going to communicate your entire staff or professionals who are working with you. The level of communications, the modulation of the communications, the voice of the communication, the language of the communication will differ from tiers to tiers. Different forms of communication. Intrapersonal communication. If we see a food that we are allergic to, we will say, I should not eat that food as it gives me a stomachache. So it is, you have communicated yourself. This way, we keep communicating with ourselves about factors that influence us or affect us. So take an example, when you are providing a service to any of your client, try to put yourself into their shoes and see how your client or your user is going to perceive the service which you have provided. If you would have been in their place, will you be satisfied, or you will not be or you will be dissatisfied? That's very important. Then interpersonal communication. Interpersonal communication takes place between two people who share some kind of a relationship. Interpersonal communications allows us to better understand the external world events, the people, and their environment. Group communications. The librarian intends to send a piece of communication to a niche community on a specific issue. This is also termed as customized information service. Suppose, take an example of Terry. When I'm sending a particular information service to the research fraternity who are working in the field of climate change, I will not send them an information which is on renewable energy sector if and only if that particular information is not related to climate change. I will try to customize that information in the climate change sector. So I know who are my clients, what is the niche community created, and whom we are sending out this customized information service. Then comes your mass communications. Like for example, in Terry, we have 1200 research professionals, and we have to communicate them. Say on a particular national holiday, the library would remain closed. So it is going to be a mass communication. You're going to send out that information to everybody. Each individual within an organization should come to know what information you want to communicate. So mass communication involves the newspapers and other print media, television, radio, internet, etc. Now, librarians as communication managers, they have to play an extremely pragmatic role, a pivotal role they have to play. In the module, I have described few components, and all of them starts with a word called an alphabet called C, as communication starts with an alphabet called C. The first is credibility. Librarians, to create and establish credibility in the organization by developing a trust with the senior management as well as with their peer groups. Content. Library manager has to be very clear in his content, which he wants to communicate and deliver. He should not be elaborative, but pinpointed and meaningful. Context. To provide the right information, it has to be well-crafted content. The contextual message should be in-depth. Continuity. The library manager and his communication should take their feedback constantly, must make his arguments. Consistency. Library manager should be consistent and promise or return what has been communicated. This will develop a trust among the management and the peer group. Channels. Library manager is required to identify and set up right communication channels to communicate. Sometimes appropriate blend of right channels would be very effective. Capacity of the audience. The identification and appropriate use of right channel for the right audience is necessary. Different channels are used depending upon the capacity and different tier of audiences. Clarity. Librarian's message that it will be clear, understandable, accurate, and give simple words, no jargons. Avoid ambiguity in the message. Usage of symbols, images are preferred and make an impact. Now, methods of communication. It is divided into two parts. One is an internal communications, which is meant for your internal client or internal user, and another is external communication for your external client or external user. There is a difference between the oral and written communication. Like for example, currently I'm talking to you. There are many things which I am talking from my own insights, from my own experiences, I'm sharing with you. But all these things cannot be documented like that, because the module which you are referring, it is going to have some in textual matter written in a certain way. So oral communications and written communications are completely different. Oral communications we generally come across in meetings, conferences, seminars, conversion, telephone presentations. Whereas written communications is in the form of letter, which is very common. We all write fax, email, report, graph and chart, where we use a lot of images, notice, advertisements, newsletter, press release, questionnaire, invitation, brochure, many things. These are all written communications. Oral communication in practice in your life will probably spend much more of your time talking and listening to colleagues and clients than you will be writing and reading. In this process, both oral and nonverbal communications becomes quite significant. There are different forms of oral communication: a private discussion, a conversation over lunch, a gossip in the lift, a telephone conversation, a chance meeting in the corridor, an informal gathering of staff, instructing subordinates, dealing with clients, formal meetings, interviews, training sessions, giving a presentations, conference seminars. All these are different forms of oral communications. One of the most important component of these oral communication is that this always helps you to get an appropriate feedback from your users in different ways. Many times they are afraid of giving you a rational feedbacks of your library services. But let me tell you from my experience, if you use any of these oral communications, it will help you to improve many of your services like anything. Now, there are some guidelines to be followed for a well structured oral message when you are giving. Desire, decide the desired outcome. What is the aim of your message? Select the important facts and figures to support your message. Identify the key points of your message. Arrange the keys in a suitable order, which will flow naturally from introduction to middle to the conclusion. Choose an appropriate styles in which you put up your message over. Its acceptance will depend very much on you. Facial expressions. It shows sincerity, warmth, assertiveness, diplomacy, fairness. Like, for example, you are sitting in a conference, and if you find that your audience, making a typical kind of facial expressions, it means they are not sincere to them either, or they are not listening to you, or they are not interested in the subject, or they are feeling bored. Body stance and gestures, ease, physical presence, enthusiasm, conviction, determination, respect, and the most important is eye contact, which is extremely important. Articulation, the tone, especially the modulation of your voice, enunciation, emphasis, volume, projection. When delivering the message, monitor the feedback constantly. It should not be one time. Watch for unusual facial expressions. You would be able to get a lot of feedback on that. Gestures, body movements. Be prepared to adjust your delivery or content in accordance with the listener's reactions. Know when you have said enough and try to end with a positive note. It is extremely important, and if you follow all these procedures, this in a well structured manner, you will improve a lot in your communication. One of the important thing as far as communication is concerned is your listening skills. We don't listen. We always communicate, but we are not good listeners. So you have to be a very good listener. Whenever a user or your client is coming to meet you or talking to you, requesting you for some information service or for some query, please listen to them carefully. If you are unable to understand his query, ask him questions repeatedly. If you don't ask him questions repeatedly, then you they will feel that you are not giving enough importance to this person. But on the other hand, you are also not a good listener, and followed by you have not understood what he is looking for. So prepare to listen. Clear your mind, no presumptions, so that your attention is assured. Concentrate on what is being said. Learn to listen, not just hear. There is a difference between listening and hearing. Hearing means overhearing something, whereas listening means paying complete attention to your user. Establish eye contact. This shows that you are listening, as does your posture. Watch for signals. Pick up aspects that speakers considers important by watching postures and gestures and listening to intonation in the speaker's words. This is like listening to the music as well as the words. Exact main points. Pick out and repeat to yourself the keywords or phrases. This will help to fix in your mind what is being said. Give feedback. Learns to give positive feedback not verbally, by nodding and smiling. Be alert so that you can provide a suitable remark or ask a question to assist your understanding of the message. Make note. Record important conversation afterwards. Your notes will serve as a useful reminder. Develop your note-taking skills by jotting down the salient points of lectures or meetings. So listening plays an important role as a library information science professional in our life. So be a good listener. Another thing is, which is very important in our profession, is interview. I'm not, it's you are not a candidate always to appear for an interview. But interview as a process comes several ways when you interact with another person. Selection interview, the kind where you consider someone for a job. It's a hiring purpose. So you need to do a lot of preparatory work for hiring somebody for an interview. Promotion interviews. This takes place when you wish to be considered for a job at a higher grade within your organization, like your appraisal systems. When your competent authority talks to you, how do you present yourself in the interviews? Appraisal interviews. This generally takes place annually to review progress and discuss the future. Counseling interviews. This may be held to find out what has been troubling the employee or why someone has not been working to usual high standard. Disciplinary interviews. This is carried out when an employee has been accused of breaching usual procedures. And grievance interviews. This is carried out when an employee feels that he or she has been treated badly by another member of the staff. Nonverbal communication. Up till now, we have been talking only verbal communication. But sometimes, even your body gesture, your movements plays a better than a sound also. Like, for example, nonverbal communication says, like, for example, posture. The way people stand or sit can say a lot about how they feel. Someone who is nervous or anxious will figure with their hands, tap their feet, drum the table with their fingers. Someone who is sitting well back in their chair, legs crossed at the ankle, may be seen as being relaxed and confident. Facial expressions. Human faces are capable of communicating a wide range of expressions and emotions. A simple conveys good humor. Raised eyebrows denote questioning and disbelief. A frown denotes upset or worry. Gestures. Many gestures are used as we speak. For example, shaking a fist to denote anger, sweeping arms in excitement, using hands for emphasis. In listening, too, gestures are used, like nodding in agreement, shaking your hand, shaking your head in disapproval, putting your hand to your chin in consideration, folding your arms in boredom. Eye contact. The importance of eye contact is paramount. Looking someone directly in the eye suggests openness, honesty, confidence, and comfort. Looking away gives an impression of being conniving or sly, or perhaps just unsure and uncomfortable. When speaking to one person, try to look them in the eye. When speaking to a group, avoid fixing your gaze on one or two people. Let your eyes revolve around regularly in all corners of the room to let everyone feel they are involved in the discussions. Now, there is a communication process. As we look at the communication process, it starts from a source and reaches to a receiver. In between, there could be noise which has to be minimized a lot. Now, for example, if I'm talking to you in any Greek language, then my entire this presentations which I am making or I'm talking to you, it has to be encoded, transmitted, and then decoded in the language which you understand. So it is extremely important to understand which language, which way I should send my message so that the receiver receives it in an appropriate way by minimizing the noise. Here, the noise doesn't mean that the noise from the outside. Here, noise means the jargons, the noise means unwanted wordings, noise means the unwanted matters which are there encoded in it. For channels of communication, formal communication network and informal communication network. The merits of formal communication network is satisfy the information needs of the organization, integrates the organization, coordination and control, sort the information for high-level executives, restricts unwanted flow of information, and reliability and accuracy of information. When I'm talking about formal communication information network, please remember a couple of points. Time consuming and expensive. As formal communication channels involves many levels, information takes time to travel across. Moreover, paperwork, involvement of executives' time, and other facilities required for the communication network make it an expensive proposition. It increases the overload of the line supervisor. Information may be distorted So when that is what basically called as a noise. When information is received by a receiver, he receives a distorted noise which creates a lot of problem and creates gaps between the top executives and the lower subordinates, which also creates a lot of noise. Informal communication network is like grapevine, social gatherings, management by walking around, secretaries and administrative assistants. Communication media, we are currently revolutionizing in an information communication technology dynamic era where ICT is playing a pragmatic role. So impact of information technology in communication is immense. And one of them important is social media, where it comes under Web 2.0, like conversation, contribution, collaboration, connection, and community development. A large number of social networking sites are available where these things can be done, like Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Flickr, Google Plus, and many more. Now, communication strategies are extremely important. Whether you are doing oral communication, written communication, non-verbal communications, using ICT, without using ICT, but strategic communication is an extremely important era. For example, who is the audience? What is the best way to convey? What is that means? When is the deadline? How much will it cost? And why is the best strategy for the audience? Now, communication strategies, it could be one-on-one, sitting across a board, or it could be a mass media, or it could be an outreach to the groups. And what are the modes of delivering this message? It could be banners, posters, displays, handouts, giveaways, mailing, media, newspapers, newsletters, radio, TV, print materials, websites, email lists, presentation to groups, partnerships, and word of mouth. Communication plan objectives to improve communications between library and its stakeholders through clear, consistent, and timely messages using a range of communication channels to promote the library as a high quality resource for the entire user community, to increase the awareness and promote the use of library facilities and resources, to promote library contributions towards the institution's strategic directions, to improve the channels available for feedback and input, to expand the channels of communication available, to increase the level of patron satisfaction with library communications. In my modules, I have taken into consideration several strategies which are either general for the general staff or for the academic staffs, which you can go into detail. And whenever you are developing your communication strategy, please follow these points very carefully. It may be customized as per your organization's strategic directions, but some of the vital points not to be missed in your communication. Then comes your barriers to communication. Is physical barrier, intellectual barrier, emotional barrier. What happens in a physical barrier? A learner may not be able to see or hear properly. It is responsibility of the communicator to be clear in speech and visual presentation. Intellectual, a learner may not be willing and eager to receive the message. Their interest may not be lie in what you have to say. As a communicator, it is important that we design our communication in such a way that it takes into account the educational levels of the people, their experiences and backgrounds. We need to select appropriate examples and situations for explaining these issues. As far as the emotional barrier is concerned, a learner may not be able to understand what is being said or shown This may happen because of lack of schooling, lack of functional literacy, of different experiences and situations. Examples, you may be speaking about a city to a rural farmer. So you won't be able to understand your language. You may have to percolate down to his level to make him understand. Suppose you are trying to disseminate information to a rural farmer on certain pesticides. So you have to speak to him on his language. Otherwise, if you use a certain kind of jargons, he won't be able to understand. So you have to comprehend that matter in the language which he understands, the farmer understands. So, skills of a good communicator: listening skills, observation, empathy, encouragement, summarizing, flexibility, timing, and planning. I'm sure with this, you would be able to be a good communicator for your library and information center. Thank you very much.